Hey everyone, welcome to the Worship Artistry podcast. My name is Jason Houtsma, and with me
is Christina Kasanka.
Hello, Christina.
Hello.
How are you?
I am, what did I use last time? I said splendid last time, so I can say fantastic this time.
Like Borat? Fantastic. Or like Count Dracula? Like what voice is that?
It's my Russian accent coming out. Fantastic.
Well, it's okay as we listen back to this podcast interview when we were going through it. Mm-hmm. My New Jersey definitely was showing.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast. Fantastic.
But listening back to the interview, I was actually really impressed by the interview. Not with myself, but with Bryan and Katie Torwalt, who are with us today.
I do love them very much.
They are, I said it to you, I don't say this very often. I don't say this about people. I don't think about them this way, but I'm just like, they're so cute.
They're very cute.
They're like a cute couple.
Especially when they're squeezed in on the little video.
On the video, I know. They're super nice.
Yeah.
But we actually had a really interesting discussion. We talked about a range of things, talking about their new live album and kind of how different that was.
Yeah, it blew my mind to think that this is their first live album. I guess because I'm so used to them being on like Jesus Culture, or I think recently they did things with Maverick. And so I was when they said that this is our first live album, I was like, what?
Like,
really?
Like, really? But it's kind of cool how they kind of let us in behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah, talking about, all their arrangements and
I know, I've always wondered about, when all these churches, when they do these songs, it's like, okay, is it that you've been doing these songs for a long time
and you decided
then you finally
to record? Yeah.
Right? Or for them, they actually were just releasing the songs on the recording date.
Yeah.
So them kind of talking about how they were able to help people know the songs and kind of go through that process, I thought was super interesting.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, it reminds me of, I had been a part of a few Maverick City recordings, and it was always really cool to, you would listen to the demos a week before and they would, tell you like, don't leak them, like don't share them with anybody.
Here's
like,
your NDA.
Yeah, I mean,
here's your demo
and they're
recording.
usually things that you wouldn't even want to share because it's just like an iPhone recording of someone sitting at a piano and being like, like they're like not the best, but you're using those to like learn the song so that when you're actually there, you are at least familiar with what's happening.
So you're in the choir.
Yes.
And you're like, I kind of know this song, and then they're just like, all right, let's go, and then away they record.
Yep.
Or like, how many rehearsals do you have leading up to that?
It was different. So I've done like 3 or 4 recordings for them, and every single one was so different. So there was one like for the Elevation album, like that we had like 2 full days, 2 like half days of rehearsal before we recorded. So it was a lot more like we really learned those songs.
Yeah.
Like we ended up knowing them. But for some of the like original, like first, I think it was like volume 3 that I was a part of, Maverick City recording, like that was like they sent us demos and there was no rehearsal. Like they just like clicked record and we're like, we don't know the words. But we'll
fix it in post.
Yeah. But with the style of their music, like because there's a lot of like callback and like they'll call out like the words, you end up just like a lot of repetition. Like you're in it, like you're fine. But it was always really cool to see like how a song would progress from a demo to an actual like full band.
Yeah.
Because there were certain songs where I would listen to the demo and I'd be like, oh, this is a fine song. Like, it's okay. And then you would listen to it with a band. You're like, oh, this song is really good. Like, this is awesome. I Thank God is actually a great example of that. Like, we got the recording and listening to it, everyone that I talked to from the choir was like, oh, that's like not really a Maverick song. Like, that feels weird. Like,
it does feel kind of odd. Like,
it was completely different. And I think that was their attitude attitude towards it as well, where it was like, oh, this is just like different. I believe it was that and Man of Your Word. I think those were 2 songs that they were like, oh, this feels like a little different from Maverick, but we'll like do it anyways. But for I Thank God, like the demo, like obviously there was none of that like spontaneous stuff of like Get Up Out of That Grave that like people love. But we didn't even rehearse it. At least I don't remember us rehearsing it. But then they jumped to it at the end.
Maybe you skipped that one?
No. I was there for sure. I was there. I remember. But we like jumped into it it was the very last song that we recorded it's on the Upper Room recording. And it was amazing. Like the way that they did it, I was like, this is the song? Like, this is not what I remember it being on the demo, but it was so cool. And I think it's still like one of the most popular songs.
It's huge.
From the record.
It's a huge song.
So cool.
Do you, when you're with Maverick City, do you practice all the
No, it just comes naturally.
There's a lot of that going on.
You're just surrounded by it and you just adopt it. You just take it all in.
Become a part of it. I love it. I love like the cultural aspect. I like all the things that happen in between songs. Like our web developer, Matt Bergsma, actually was at a live recording. Yeah. I think it was one of the Winds of Worship one for Vineyard. And if you remember those way back when. But in between, like before one of the songs, he noticed he was standing near a microphone and he just waited for it to get quiet. And then he just yells out, "Hi, Mom!" And you can totally hear it on the recording. It made it.
Oh, goodness. I remember that at one of the Maverick recordings, there was a microphone right up top. I looked up, it was one of those SM7s. And I look up and there's a mic there. I'm like, oh, no.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Your voice is going to be in here.
Yeah. So my voice is definitely, you can hear it clearly on several songs. But in particular, at the beginning of Such an Awesome God, just the first 2 seconds is just a good old laugh. My laugh is just ha ha ha, just at the beginning. And when we learned that song at church, I had sent that recording over to my band and they were listening to it and they all were like, "Christina, is that your laugh?" And I'm like,
definitely.
It sure is. It sure is. So if you want to hear me laugh, just go listen to Such an Awesome God. Just the very beginning, like the first 2 seconds. That's me. That's your girl.
There you go. Well, you're getting that behind the scenes look. Now, we've done these in scenarios, but Bryan and Katie had this really fresh, and they actually did it really well and professionally, and didn't have people laughing in between all the things and everything else, or yelling, "Hi, Mom." And they put together a great recording, so they're going to let us in to hearing about that. And we actually had a lot of interesting discussion. This is just one part of it. So without further ado, Bryan and Katie Torwalt. Bryan and Katie Torwalt, so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be with you guys today.
Absolutely.
So my first question right off the bat is, Bryan, you're Canadian, and you spell Bryan with a Y. Is that in relationship to Bryan Adams? Is that like a Canadian thing? Is that the way Canadians spell Bryan?
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think my parents were huge Bryan Adams fans, but maybe it's possible. I don't know what I like my name spelled with a Y now. Anytime someone spells it with an I, I'm just like, no, you spelled it wrong.
If you really like Bryan's skin, though, all you have to do is accidentally call him Byron.
Oh,
it's very true.
My grandmother. Wait, so we have my son's name is Bjorn, and my grandmother, she just could not say his name. Like she was older and she just it was Byron. She's like, I think his name is B. John. Like she just called him everything. Finally, she just started calling him Honey. She's like, "Hey, Honey."
Hey, Honey.
Look at it. See?
B. John.
That's great.
I like B. John.
B. John is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, no, not so much. Awesome. Well, hey, so man, really excited. I've been listening to the new record, kind of listening to what you guys have been doing, and first of all, it's awesome. It's live. It has a really different feel than a lot of some of the stuff that you guys have done, and have loved the previous stuff. But just it seems like there's a little bit of a turn. What was kind of the vision for this project going into it?
Yeah, that's great.
You want to go? We're married, so we have this we look at each other. Who's answering first? For all the listeners, the awkward silence for those couple seconds, that's us looking at each other.
Yep.
We like to change things up if we can. I think if you go back to our first album, and then throughout the process, we've always I'm sure that maybe our listeners are like, "Oh, that sounds like Bryan and Katie," but to us, we always feel like, "Oh, we're making big changes." But one of the biggest thing with this record is it's actually our first live album that we've ever recorded. We've done a few live songs with different bigger projects, but this is the first time that we actually recorded a full-length album live. And for us, we wanted to try and make it as live as possible. Honestly, we got a choir to be with us. I think we've done a few things with Maverick City over the last couple of years, and was really inspirational to us. And we obviously are nothing like Maverick City.
I've always wanted a real choir, though. I've always wanted a real choir, and I think it's become way more normal, even in the last couple of years, thanks to them. To hear that be a big part. We've always had gang vocals. I could always
on our studio albums.
Could always get everybody to give us gang vocals, but never like a choir. Yeah. So that was really fun to have this round. Yes. And I think also, I think during the pandemic, we're home and we live in California, and we were home quite a bit those last couple of years. And so for me, a huge blessing was live worship music, specifically live, a lot on YouTube, a lot with video content that I could just play in the house. We had obviously the news on so much the last couple of years, and just trying to hear, especially the beginning where we're like, what day is it and what's next?
We've had zero news the last 4 months.
No, but I think I really realized I think when if we're just putting on live worship to just play throughout the day, the atmosphere is so much better. We all know this, right? We all know this is nothing new, but it really was a very tangible thing during that several months, especially in the beginning. And so when we set out to make this project, we really talked about, wouldn't that be cool if we could do this live and capture it? Like you said, we've never done that before, way outside of our comfort zone, because I think sometimes it's been fun for us, and then also it's a little bit of a comfort thing of being in the studio. You get to go back for as long as you want and change stuff. And
before anyone hears anything.
Before anyone knows it exists, And so with a live project like that, we did 14 songs in one night at a church that we love down in Costa Mesa that we've done a lot of worship nights and stuff at. And it was very vulnerable because, we don't know how everyone's going to react to these songs, and we get to see it on their face if they like it or not right there. But it also was so powerful, and we really felt like that's what we were supposed to do. And so it's been really fun to be able to have this project and have it out now for people to hear and hopefully be blessed by.
Yeah. One of the things that we ended up doing on this record that is different for us is we've always had a lot of layers and a lot of either electric guitar layers or a lot of strings or, just different synth things. And so for this one, we were like, what if we replace all those different layers with choir, so vocals be a major layer? And then we were writing one of the songs that we wrote on this, that we have on this record, is called Holding On to Hope. And we wrote it with a friend, and the songwriting little voice memo demo that we did was us all singing around his organ in his music room. And it really triggered something, and we were like, what if that other layer for this record is just an organ instead of the second and third electric guitar and stuff like that? And so that, honestly, it was one of those simple moments that switched things, that were like, hey, let's just try something different. And having the guy that played as a friend named Tim Reddick, and just having him part of it added so much energy to the night that it just, for us, it felt different, it felt fun, and just a new, fresh experience for us. More than anything, it's we want to not get bored with our own music, so let's try something different. Yeah,
I think just a fresh take on what we love to do. It's nice. It's been fun for us, for sure. I don't know, I'm not sure how everybody else feels yet, because it's only been out for a month, but for us, it's been really fun.
Well, we've been enjoying it. So I'd love to kind of put those two things, kind of juxtapose those two things together. How do you got, what is your typical process when you go into to make a studio record, and then how is that different from actually going and how did you think about it differently?
I think for a studio record, we go in a lot less developed of songs. I think in a studio record, we know that we have time. We know that at the end of the day, if it doesn't feel ready, we can just extend our time. And so we have a little more freedom, and we're let's just go in and see what happens in the studio. Where in the live moment, you're oh, these songs have to be arranged and feel good to be put on a record before we press record. And so I think we underestimated the amount of energy it would take to get those songs feeling like they were complete before we press record.
Yeah. And the difference between going in a studio, you're singing the songs, you're familiar because you wrote the song, to now you're instantly worship leading with these songs, leading other people. Different. Completely different. also I feel like though there's something really special and real that happens in that like raw stage where it's still like, hey, this is still kind of, it's happening in real time. This is happening in real time. And it very much was like that for this record. I mean, I think there's probably different levels of that depending on who you are recording live and how you like to do it. But for us, for this, it was very real time happening. The songs were finished and the arrangements were loosely finished, but a lot of the stuff that was captured just happened in the moment. And that was really fun for us. I love that. So, but it also is a little scary and extra vulnerable because it could just be a train wreck. So
did you have any moments where you're like, whoa?
Yeah, I think a very first song that we recorded. Also, I mean, we just haven't gathered that much just as a church, like just as a big church in the last couple of years. Like we've talked about it so much because we still lead worship at our local church here. And even ourselves, like we laughed because for a year, especially living on the West Coast, California, we didn't have church regularly on a Sunday until like Easter of 2021.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of church mornings in our living room. Our little girl, we have a 4-year-old little girl. She thinks that you genuinely eat bacon while you watch church. She calls it church bacon. And we had like bacon and coffee and cinnamon rolls, and we watched church in our living room. And we were engaged. We're watching church, but at the same time, that is not a replacement for participating in actual church, being there, picking your family up, taking what you need, packing into the car, and going and being the church.
And actively worshiping and participating and contributing. We're so used to consuming and just like, have it on. Like, even like I was saying, like the pros of the last couple of years with live worship playing in the house while I'm cooking, while I'm cleaning, whatever. But it is a different thing when everybody's in the room together and you realize everybody can see each other and you're leading people in worship and they're worshiping too. Like what God's about to do in that room is because of the people in that room. Oh, sorry. Bryan just went off and sneezed like 5 times.
It's okay. I still saw it in the mirror behind you. So you got.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. So I think it's been interesting. So that very first song of the night, you could still feel that lingering of just like, wait, we can all see each other. We're really in this room together. Like, this is really happening right now, or am I just replaying this already, like watching this? And even for myself, but everybody, was a little bit more timid, a little bit more, less demonstrative, kind of just feeling like, wait, I'm here physically. And then by the end of the night, it was very much the opposite. But
wild.
After that first song, I was like, okay, maybe it's going to be a little bit more subdued than I thought. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more, people are singing, people are like absorbing, but they're not necessarily like so actively participating. That went away after probably that very first song. Yeah, but for sure. I had a moment there where I was like, Lord Jesus, help me. Help me, Lord.
So when you're doing this, so when you're leading, you were saying that, you're kind of seeing this in real time. Did the crowd, did they know the songs all in advance? Like how did that happen? Are these things that you have been doing? Did you guys send out like, hey, here's some demos so you're there and you're not just like shocked by what's happening?
For real, we sent out very rough demos.
Vulnerable.
And it was very vulnerable and humbling. But we sent out rough demos of everything because we ended up doing like to all the choir. We had a choir director, so that was like the first layer of that helped bring energy a lot. But then we ended up doing like a really cheap ticket just so we could know that people were coming. And we sent to all the ticket buyers, we sent the really rough demos so that they got every song. And that was scary, but it really helped.
It was so great though. I mean, it was very scary because it's just like most of them were us and like a piano or something. Very much like as songwriters or as writers or as musicians, whatever, you have these voice memos on your phone, you have these little recordings that where it's headed, what you would like it to sound like when it's completed. But right now it sounds like amateur hour.
Yeah, you don't want the general public like consuming that.
And so, but at the same time sending those out, I felt like, I think you can see it on the videos, like people were already like had already had a moment worshiping to the songs and they brought that with them to the night. And so that was so valuable to us. I think that was really well worth it. doing it that way, even though, I was like, oh my gosh, please don't share this with anybody.
I know the amount of, I just had a worship practice and I was like, okay, everyone remember that's memo 367. And they're like, how many? I'm like, I've already deleted like hundreds of off this phone, like the amount of those demos that's awesome. I'm sure they sounded better than you thought they did, would be my guess.
I don't know.
It actually kind of makes me think of, like, as a worship leader, I'm like, should I send demos to the congregation before we introduce a new song? Like, that could actually be kind of a cool thing.
I mean, sometimes I think there is more of that we could do, and just like, showing stuff before it's finished. I don't know. It's a fine line, right? There's like attention to it because you want to lead people and have something already developed. But at the same time, I think there's one thing for us being worship pastors too. We got to share a lot of the songs while they're being written and lead them with our congregation, and even make tweaks and stuff if it's just not really feeling like it's that singable for people, or we're losing people on a bridge or a hook, or there's whatever, adding more space where it does feel like naturally, like, you know what, people just want to worship here, and we're like rushing to the next thing. That's been really cool to be able to use that environment. And then our church gets to be really part of the process of writing songs. They're their songs much so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like my congregation teaches me my own songs sometimes, because at the end of the day, it's like, you're like, oh, I'm sure they don't really, I can change this, and then they all go in this other direction. Like, okay, I guess that's good now. We're going to stick with that idea. Super helpful. So I know I'm kind of like stuck on this, like this instrumentation, like live thing. Like, because our thing is, we're trying to take albums that have all these pieces and then make them like very playable live, right? That is the main focus of what we do. So when you're arranging for that live environment, did you find like one thing that we find, right, is that, when there's a studio album, you have to have all these extra things to fill space because you don't have the room and you don't have all the people, right? Like those take up a big space in the mix. When you guys were practicing and kind of like putting it together, were you kind of like, all right, we think this will fill out the record. We think it's going to sound big. We're not sure. Like, what was your feeling about that?
Stress level 100. No, that's real. Honestly, we had to remind ourselves. So we were writing and kind of doing some very basic pre-pro demos with a guy that helped us produce it, Jonathan Berlin. And then we had a week of rehearsals with the band that we brought in, and we were kind of half developed songs, then half like kind of finishing some parts that week, and like going over arrangements, the ones that didn't feel quite right, and having input from band and all that kind of stuff. All really incredible musicians that we trust and love, and a lot of them have traveled with us over the years. But we reminded ourselves throughout that week so many times, like, oh yeah, and then the choir will be singing here, and then the audience will probably catch on here. And honestly, we truly reminded ourselves throughout that whole week, feeling very hopeful / very nervous if that would actually happen. But it turned out to be honestly as good or better than we had hoped for. We ended up bringing in a choir director who ended up being perfect for the project, and he's like a worship pastor himself and understood the dynamic between, like a gospel choir also just like worshiping in a room. It ended up being great.
Yeah, but I mean, the truth is it feels scary because you do want to sometimes just add those layers, add some tracks, that safety net of like, everyone's not going to just stop playing, right? Like we're not going to just like go dark here, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm glad we didn't. Some of this isn't really right or wrong. It's just taste, right?
Right.
Too. It's not like, because I think that wall of sound or just that very lush, beautiful landscape, we've done that quite a bit in our music with strings and stuff like that, is actually beautiful. I think we just wanted to try something a little bit more simplified and emphasize the piano, emphasize the voices, emphasize the organ a little bit more. We had an amazing piano player who could like play the piano, not just like, we're not like hitting a button, like he's playing the piano.
It's not just chords and tracks. It's like
I think he's going more that direction anyway, actually. Yep. I love it because you hear someone that can just like play the piano like that. It is so moving, so beautiful. And we haven't had as much of that, I feel like, in worship in the last couple of years. So I'm really excited to have more of that. And, but yeah, all that to say, yes, there was moments leading up to it where like, is this full enough? Is this gonna like convey what we're trying to convey with these songs? So we hope it did. We hope it did.
I think so. I thought it sounded great. So, you know, it all comes from that. I'm curious about the songs. It was really interesting. You know, a lot of times we think about songs in like different, we kind of almost put them in different boxes, and we have kind of, you know, this is a vertical song. This song is to God. This is a horizontal song. This song is to everybody else. Like, we're exhorting. You guys are like, you're doing that. You're like this part's to God. This part's like from God. This part's to everybody else. Then we're back to God. Now it's me. Like, do you guys think really, and it works really well. Do you guys think about that intentionally? Is that just kind of how the songs tend to play out? Like, what is the character of that you bring to those songs?
That's a great question, actually. Nobody's asked us that before. And I think part of it is just that my brain especially is pretty, a nice way to say it would be abstract. I would say a little chaotic. And so I can just hop around without even realizing I'm doing that. But I think the common thread that we were intentional about with the writing process of this record is that everything is through the lens of Jesus now. And it's from like, so we're going to try to tell that story and come back to where we are in this moment, kind of a thing. We're going to remember certain moments in the Gospels. We're going to talk about the Sermon on the Mount. There's a song that's still going to come out. We're actually releasing a few more songs that haven't been released yet because we recorded so many songs that night. They'll release pretty soon, which we're really excited about. There's a song called The Christ the King, and it's from that perspective of Jesus asking Peter, who do you say I am, Peter? And he goes on to say, you know, they're saying that you're this, you're this, you're this. And he asks again, but Peter, who are you saying that I am? Who do you say that I am? And then he says, you're the Christ, you're the King, you're the living, the breathing God. And so it's abstract in the sense of like, so Jesus is asking the question, then Peter's answering, then Jesus is asking us.
And then we're singing.
And we're singing it, and we're saying, you're this, you're this, you're this. And so it's very, I feel like what's helped me, at least so far, singing these songs and leading these songs is just giving even like a little bit of like biblical context before we've sung, especially some of the more abstract ones. We have a song called Sound Mind on there. Going back to the scripture where it originated for us and saying, this is what the Bible says, that it did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. That's why we're going to sing. And so we're going to say, in my chaos, you're the peace. In my suffering, you're here with me. And then we're going to go to that scripture and like say the words that were given to us, you know? And so it is kind of all over the place in that sense. But at the same time, to me, it makes sense. What about you? I don't know. What does it make you think of?
I think we definitely try, and as we write, it's a creative process. It's a journey. And then when we feel like the song's in a good place through conversations with us, with the other writers, and even with some friends and some family that we like trust in theologically, we're like, does this make sense? And if we feel like we have, you know, from our handful of people that we check in with, like kind of the stamp of approval of like, oh yeah, that makes sense and it feels grounded in the word. Because since at the end of the day, we're writing worship songs that we want to serve the church. And sometimes that's serving the church on a Sunday morning where it's a little bit more clear. Sometimes that's serving the church as they listen to worship music in their car or in their kitchen. And I think we feel like we're writing songs for both. For both because we need that for ourselves for both. And there's songs that we feel that we've written that like, this works amazing on a Sunday morning. And we hope that a lot of our songs do that. But at the end of the day, like, there's a ton of worship music that we just put on in the car that maybe we wouldn't lead on a Sunday morning for our church, but they really speak to us and mean a lot to us. And so I think finding ourselves in the middle in that tension and being okay with like, hey, some of these songs we just need for the car and some of these songs we need for our Sunday morning serving
And I think
church.
you see too, even like, maybe I'm just here to encourage, I'm encouraging myself in this, but in the Psalms, you know, you see David like process and tell the story of like, what's the current situation. And then he reminds the soul, he reminds the spirit, and then there's that vertical moment of like, I can't help but after remembering like who God is in this moment, like, hallelujah, like worthy is your name, worthy to be praised. And so I think there's some of that in our music too, where it's like, it's very conversational. And then through the process of remembering what the word says or declaring those things that are more maybe human experience, you're led to that vertical moment of like, but in the midst of it, I choose this, or I can't help, this is welling up out of me, this worship, this praise, and all glory to God. Like, and so I hope that that's what it invokes in other people. But it might not be for everybody. Once again, like everything's not for everybody. So we hope that it can touch people and that it can serve people in their moments with Jesus too. But yeah.
This is a great question.
I love that.
It's art, right? Like I always think of, worship leaders, we have congregational songs and they're like tools, right? They're like, okay, how are we going to lead people into, like, how are we going to, somebody said it recently, how are we going to drag folks to the throne of God? Like, we're going and we're taking you with us. And those songs are those tools. But then we also have this kind of, at the same time, this, like our worship leading should flow out of a life of worship, right? And there are those things that draw us deeper into God in different ways and show us different perspectives. And I think there's such a place for all of that, and then for us to then have the discernment and recognize like, oh, this song needs context if we're going to sing this, like that's kind of like the leader's job. Like, okay, we're going to talk about this and we're going to explain it, which is going to give the song way more power and give everybody way more ownership over it. And so I love that you think about that. And I think it's great. Did you always feel the freedom to do that?
No,
because the worship world, it feels like we want to genreify everything, right? Like, you guys are this cool. Let's put you here and let's keep you here. Like, what's it like for you to kind of change through that?
That's a great question too. I think, we all are growing people. We're all human people. We're all experiencing different things in life. And you even see it in the last couple of years. Like, we've all had this collective experience, but our own personal experiences and the lens we look through is very different. And so I think it's very vulnerable to like put yourself out authentically where you are at right now with Jesus out in the open, but at the same time so rewarding, because I feel like at least for me personally, seeing somebody lead from that place, my favorite worship leaders, my favorite songwriters are people that do that are very transparent, that are very authentic and human with where they're at. And you can see them then choosing that sacrifice of praise, choosing that moment and to lead and bring other people there with them. And I think it's so powerful. And it makes me think of actually Melissa Helser. She is who wrote Sound Mind with her and her husband. And, there's something so powerful about when she leads, because she has her own like things, even physically. She deals with a lot of pain physically, as she's talked about it a lot openly and stuff, but chronic pain. And so when you see her choose to like dance through that pain or lift up a certain song or say a certain word, what it cost her. And I just think it's so powerful to see. And so for me, that only comes with like living and being authentically, writing from a place of authenticity and leading from that place and being known, off the stage as well is really, really valuable. But yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question. I think that I've become more and more comfortable with that as I've gotten older. Even honestly, just talking outside of singing on stage is even new for me. Like, I didn't do that for years. I was afraid to go off the map at all. And I feel like I found a lot more freedom in that over the last couple of years, just being like, this is all I have to give. This is it, if Jesus is speaking to me about a certain thing, like, who am I to like not step out in that? That's all he's asking of me. If I won't do that, like, why am I up here?
And I think even within the context of our local church, like, we have a great relationship with our pastor. And so we definitely feel the freedom to do that, especially as we're introducing new songs and give people context for what we're talking about and singing about, and hopefully help them like in their relationship with Jesus. And I think we've realized through the years how much, for good and for not good sometimes, how much we've learned about God as like growing up in the church through the songs that we were singing and helping shape perspective. And a lot of that really helpful. And then some of it you're like, oh, do we believe that about God? Is that true, kind of thing? But I think we really see the weight and the responsibility in what we're writing and what we're asking people to sing and declare. And then, but at the same time, it's really incredible. Like we'll listen to a sermon, like a sermon that really impacts us. You know, we'll listen to it a few times, maybe we'll go back and we'll like re-listen to it. But a song that speaks to us or meets us where we're at, we'll listen to that over and over and over and over again. And so you have this kind of hidden opportunity through songs and through worship to impact someone's walk with Jesus, their life, in a way that I think we maybe didn't even realize when we first started writing songs.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's you become more confident in what you're doing, right? And you see it's like, you know, more who you are. And so that there's way less to like hide, right? It's almost like, oh, okay, I've gotten older. I now know, like, this is me. Here you go.
Like, you know. And it doesn't go away. And it's vulnerable every single time. It's risky.
It's definitely not always perfect.
No. And I think that is just, you just become more like, yeah, that doesn't really go away. Like, you know, you just have to step out of that and trust Jesus and risk with Jesus and let the Holy Spirit lead. And come prepared to balance it all, you know.
It helps. It helps if you got something to fall back on, right? Like, we're at least here.
Where you can be, because then you know exactly what that looks like to go off the map and how to get back.
So you guys had talked about how you kind of in releasing songs to the congregation, like you have a few people that you go and you put them in front of. Like, what are the qualities of the people that you have chosen to do? Like, why have you chosen? What about them has made them somebody that you want to go to and say, hey, will you like look at what we're doing and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, one of them is actually Katie's dad, who is like really super well read, really incredible like theological grasp, was a pastor at a different point in time, and is getting his master's in counseling. Huge fan of what he's doing, but he's someone that we will bring some songs that we feel like, hey, does this make sense, like from a theological standpoint? So he's definitely one of those people. And then sometimes we'll just, some of our closest friends or even our worship team, you know, we'll test out songs at our church that maybe we're not sure, and so we have, you know, our pastor will be like, yeah, love that one. Or like, yeah, how'd that feel for you guys? You know, subtle, but I think
that was a song.
Yeah, that was a song.
Whole thing.
Yeah, those are the main people. And then even the different writers that we're writing with, I think we'll push on it a little bit more if we don't feel like it's quite right, and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, you know.
There was a lyric in this round that got cut. That we have a song called Simple Kingdom. We wrote with Cody Carnes, another writer named Paul Duncan. And there was just a line that it wasn't wrong, but every time we went to go sing it, I'm like, I think we could just be a little bit more pointed, like a little bit more specific with it. And we brought it to a couple different people. We're like, is this biblical? And they're like, actually it is. And we ultimately decided, is it what we really want to say right here? Are we using this little tiny space that we have to really like drive the point home and to like make it very concise? And we ended up being like, no, actually. And I think it was Paul that came back and was like, what about this? The line is, may we die daily. And then we changed it to our pride laid to rest, to make it very clear, like, what are we dying to? We're dying to self.
Right. Yeah. You know? Like better
picture,
right?
And so to complete that little moment, but that was kind of down to the last minute, and I was really happy we did that, because I felt like it gives people, you are asking people to sing with you these words, you know, and there's like a weight to that, and we want it to be biblical, and we want people to understand what they're saying and why they're saying it. And so even that, why I would give the context sometimes if it is more of like
obscure,
or an unfamiliar story from the Bible, or just, our interpretation, or a backstory, like a personal story. We have a song called Prophesy or Promise that has a line that is a little bit like pushing the envelope. in the bridge, and it just says fear can go to hell and shame can go there too. And I definitely feel like there's certain rooms that we're in that sometimes like I definitely need to give context for that. Why I'm saying that, and why I feel like it's biblical to say like fear can go. And then even sometimes I'll throw in fear can go back to hell where it originated. And just if anybody's unsure of like what we're saying here, you can go back where it came from. You're just telling, and if that's, if you feel ready to say that with me, great. If you don't, this is why I said it and this is why we wrote it. And then I feel like okay about it. But yeah, all that to say, we do take it really seriously. I feel like it's a weighty thing. Whether you wrote the song or you're just picking a set for a Sunday morning, you're just playing, you're playing electric guitar or whatever. It is such a privilege, and it's such a weighty thing to lead people into the presence of God, and you're leading people somewhere,
Yeah.
Right.
You're up there leading people somewhere, and so we want to make sure it's to Jesus.
Yeah. And then walking away at the end of the day, realizing that it's also still art, and not everyone's gonna get it every time.
Yeah.
Being okay with that too. I think it's living in that tension is important to like be okay with that.
Right. Yeah. Like good art should push us a little bit, right? Like it kind of goes all over the place. It's like we could have named worship Artistry a lot of different things, but we chose the name Artistry because we really want people to take songs and like make them their own and like make it, learn it this way, but then make it something new, and it's like, and I always really appreciate, I like it when artists take chances and when like, as long as there's a purpose to it, right? And it's not just like, well, this will probably get a few more clicks, like it's and so just to know how much you guys think through it and go through the process is awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that, and thanks for so much for making this record. It's great, listen through it and just love the sound, love the overall vibe, and like there's some great songs on there. So guys, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us and share your heart. It's awesome. It makes me want to go back and listen to the record even more.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having us. It's been fun.
Case. One more thing. What's kind of next? What's next for you guys? Like, normally we get through a project, you have this big push to get a project out. I know for me, by the time that I'm done with the project, I'm like, I'm so over this project and I'm already on to the next thing that I'm not even necessarily over it, but more just like, my wife will often tell me, I don't even know why you make things, because like by the time you have it out, you're just like, but my next thing,
yeah, it'd be even better.
Yeah. So what's next on the agenda for you guys?
Yeah. Right now, I think we didn't really talk about it on this one, but we are just kind of finished one of the busiest seasons that we've had in like 10 years of doing this, of going from finishing writing through all the production in a really fast turnaround. And then we just got off the road from a couple weeks of tour with a good friend of ours, Ben Hastings. And so now we're like taking a breath, and I think Katie mentioned we have a few more songs from this record. Surprise on the deluxe album that's coming out. I think July 1st.
Spotify exclusive.
Yeah. So we have that, and then we have a few events that we're doing and looking at some other things that we're doing in the fall. But I think for us, as we write, we have a tendency to write and get everything out and everything feel cohesive, and then we're like, okay, let's breathe and let's what's God saying for the next season? Because everything that we to the best of our ability, it's not necessarily trying to say everything we can say like that's never been said, but trying to say things in the right season. And so I think that's our hope, is go back to that place of like, okay, God, what's next, and listening and live life a little bit and process, and the weird artist things that we do that.
Go back into our hibernation.
Yeah, for real. But we, I think in for the summer, we have a 4-year-old, so just having fun and doing some adventures and stuff like that. So a little bit of all that, while also still trying to stay disciplined in writing and creating like along the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
Are there seasons for you guys? Do you have certain, like, does spring roll around and you kind of oh man, I've got a lot of stuff bubbling up? Or do you have seasons like that? Do you kind of write all in one season and then rest? Or is it kind of just always circulating?
There's always a little bit, but we go through definitely seasons where we push harder.
I think we got, like, even for this record, can't remember if we already told you this or not, but we thought we were going to write all these songs like right away. And we had the story and everything, and we didn't get the first song that was on this record for like 6 months. And even when we released that one, Wouldn't It Be Like You, that one was just a single. We thought, okay, I don't know what we're doing next. But right around that same time is when we're like, oh my gosh, like as we're just reading the Bible, as we're just, having time with God, leading worship, we're like, oh, there's more I want to say here. I want to talk about the Gospels. We want to write about the Sermon on the Mount. We want to write about the Beatitudes. Like, we want to write about the Holy Spirit again. And so all these songs kind of just started to, we realized that we were just keeping the discipline up, that these songs were all part of the same story. And that's really where the project came from. And we try to be disciplined in general, but at the same time, I think when God just speaks, if you're already in that zone and you're ready to put the work in, it all flows really pretty easily. And but it was really fast. When actually the songs started to come together to when we recorded to when it released was a very short period of time for us, the fastest it's ever been. And so it took a little extra work in just hours of having like a small child, working from home kind of, and it was like very tiring. So we're gonna go to a concert tonight.
Yeah.
I hope to go to the beach this summer, and we're gonna continue to just listen and hopefully
keep writing.
Whether it's for other people or for ourselves, and we'll see. We would like to go back out. Leading worship with people in rooms of real people is so precious. I've never been more sure that I love it after these last couple years of all the recordings and, streamed worship services and stuff. It's just like, even this last tour that we did that he just mentioned with Ben, every single night was different. God did so many like powerful things that I just feel like happened because we were all in the room together. And so I hope to do more of that this year too.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I loved the parallel that Katie drew with when you asked her about the vertical and horizontal worship songs. And she brought the comparison in of David and the Psalms, because I love the Psalms. I read them all the time. I mean, I never stop, like every single day. Like I just like go in circles around them, and there's always something new. But something that she like pointed out was like, like he totally has certain Psalms where they were like so like horizontal. But then other times it's like, no, absolutely, like just vertical, straight to Jesus. Like, and it was really cool. Like I had never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Of
like her bringing that in with comparing it with the Psalms. That was very cool.
Well, it's funny because if you actually look at just within kind of quote unquote modern worship, there has been a change in how it was. Like the idea of vertical worship was a new thing at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, you can go back to all the little two-step, bouncy songs, but they were like teaching, they were just all about God.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, we're just going to sing these songs about God. And then somewhere along the line, I feel like it was kind of in the vineyard world, kind of, as the deer, even kind of like those ideas of we started talking about you instead of him.
Or even I love you, Lord.
Right.
Yeah. Like that was, I think that changed a lot of things. Like there had never been a song written just like, I love you, Lord. It's like, whoa, like you can say that.
Right. Speaking directly to God. But then I think it swung so far that way and it became like, that's worship. And it's like, but the whole point of congregational worship and gathering together is both to sing to God, but then also to exhort one another. Like it's a whole thing. And so I love their take on mixing those things. Yeah. And I too love the Psalms. I'm just like in love with them. I love how human they are. Yeah. And how you're like, oh yeah, I totally feel that way. Yeah. And you know what? David's kind of given me some permission to feel that way.
Yeah. Especially when it goes from a Psalm that's like, God, you will never leave me and you're my refuge. And the next one is like, God, why did you leave me?
Totally. But that's
and you're like,
how we feel. That's like real,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's like totally relatable. That's me every day of my life. Well, maybe not every day, but like from season to season of just like recognizing that it's like, oh, okay, like this is a process. This is relationship. Like this is good.
It's amazing. So, well, if you would like to go check out some songs and learn some vertical worship songs as well as some horizontal songs and kind of everything in between, it really, I have noticed that there has been a real branching out of what is considered
really
worship music, and that in that sense, you also have to be aware of like, okay, this song is for my congregation, this song maybe isn't, and kind of like working your way through it, but. I don't know, it's kind of interesting that way. But anyway, I have such a problem staying on task sometimes. But if you would like to actually go learn some songs for 5-piece band, you can go do that at worshipartistry.com with a free trial. If you don't want to do that, we would love it if you would just give us a review on iTunes or wherever you, I guess Apple Podcasts is what it's called. They don't do podcasts on iTunes anymore.
No, they do. It's the podcast app.
There's no iTunes, right? It's just Apple Music.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Earlier today, we told Christina to go to Kinko's to do something. She was like, what is that? What does that mean? Oh, the building that used to be, it's FedEx now, but it used to be Kinko's.
I had no idea. Never heard of it.
Where I spiral bound my senior paper. So anyway.
Throwback.
Yeah, so we're way off the rails here. So Christina, I'll see you next time.
See you next week. Just kidding. See you in 2 weeks. You're like, I got this, Jason. I'll land the plane. Don't worry about it.